We then move to the next motion from councillors, which is changes to winter fuel allowance and protecting pensioners from fuel poverty, proposed by Councillor Russell Perrin and seconded by Councillor Saggers. Councillor Perrin, can I see that formally moved? And Councillor Saggers, formally seconded?
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you. In which case, Councillor Perrin, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I concede that this is an emotive issue, and I'll try my best to keep it to the facts. But I'm very sad to have to move a motion as the motion that we're moving tonight. As the motion sets out, the Council notes that the Government's recent decision to restrict the winter fuel allowance to only pensioners in receipt of means-tested benefits like pension credit, as announced by Chancellor Rachel Reeves. The estimated impact of that decision has not gone unnoticed, which HUK say will mean 2 million pensioners who badly need the money to stay warm this winter will not receive it. It is estimated that up to 11,000 pensioners within this district will be affected by these changes. The significant role of the winter fuel payments play in helping older residents of Harlow and across the UK afford heating during the coldest months, thereby preventing heat or eat dilemmas and safeguarding health. The criticism from many and HUK, the Countryside Alliance and other charities highlighting the social injustice and potential health risks posed by this sudden policy change, and that we note the additional strain that this decision will place on vulnerable pensioners in Harlow, many of whom do not claim pension credit despite being eligible, which will further exacerbate the problem. I won't read the whole motion, but what I will do is move to the steps that we as a council might take in light of these changes. To bring forward a council-led awareness campaign to alert those eligible for pension credit, which in some respects will help access to winter fuel payment for those most in need. That we request that the council leader and the Member of Parliament write to the Chancellor of the Exchequer urging an urgent review of the decision to means test the winter fuel payment and asking the government to ensure that vulnerable pensioners, particularly those who do not claim pension credit, are protected from fuel poverty. We ask that the council commit to signing the whatlabourssaid.com/winter fuel payment petition and the Save the Winter Fuel Payment for Struggling Pensioners petition run by Age UK, and to write to all members offering the opportunity to sign the petition themselves, and to encourage local efforts to promote pension credit uptake through the council services and eligible partnerships with local charities and community organisations to ensure that all eligible pensioners in Harlow are supported in claiming their entitlement. Chair, those are the facts, and that's what the motion is asking that we ask this council to do. I look forward to hearing what others have to say on the matter. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Perrin. Before we move on, I understood that under 15.7 notice was given that you were going to alter the motion to the version that is on the table before us. Can I just seek clarity that that's still the case?
I'm happy to accept that, Chair.
Okay, and is the seconder happy with that?
I am, Chair.
So 15.7 allows us to do that with the agreement of the Chamber. Is the Chamber agreed on that?
Agreed.
Okay, so that is the substantive motion as is on the table and as has been moved and seconded. I'll turn to the seconder. Councillor Saggers, do you wish to speak at this time? Reserve your right, not
I
speak?
reserve my right, Chair.
Okay, I'll throw it open to the floor for debate. Anyone wish to debate the motion? No? Councillor Garnett.
If nobody else wants to speak, I'll have a few words to say. I'll stand up. I feel better if I assume I can still see it. Mr. Chairman, members, I speak tonight in support of Councillor Perrin's motion and the 11,000 Harlow pensioners who now face the heartbreaking prospect of living in cold homes this winter. The motion highlights the total disregard by Chris Finch and his Labour government for the millions of pensioners who currently receive the winter fuel allowance. The Labour Chancellor's decision to means test the winter fuel allowance is making the pensioners of not only Harlow but England facing a very bleak winter without any heating. All this is to support their paymasters, the unions. I wonder why they have been so quiet during the election. To save 1.8 billion, they cut the winter fuel allowance to millions of pensioners and vulnerable households, but have given more inflation pay rises, railway workers, salaries now up to 69,000, junior doctors 22% over 2 years, at a cost of 9.4 billion. Oh, and wait for it, 8.3 billion for their pet scheme of the BG Energy project, which will only increase the energy bills for customers. The Chancellor has misguided grasps of public finances, but leopards do not change their spots. Rob Peter to pay Paul. In this case, rob the pensioners to pay the union demands. This time, it is a disgraceful attack on our pensioners and vulnerable households. People who have worked hard all their lives and paid their taxes. Now they are faced with turning off their heating. The Labour group accused us of having a 10 million black hole in our finances. I challenged them publicly to find it. So why should we believe the Labour government that there is a black hole in the public finances? And this is a reason for cutting the winter fuel allowance for 11,000 pensioners in Harlow and the vulnerable. Did you see this cut in their manifestos? Of course not. They were not transparent with us during the general election either. The public were never warned of this, and now we are told they do not have a choice. That's not true. Chris Vince, the former leader of the Labour group when in administration, voted in favour of cutting the allowance despite saying many times he would fight for the residents of Harlow. He fell at the first time of asking, failing 11,000 pensioners of this town. I am particularly concerned about the health of those vulnerable households who are eligible for the pension credit and thereby the winter fuel allowance, but do not claim for it. We are on the side of on this side of the chamber will do our best to achieve those, advise those hard-up pensioners and vulnerable households how to apply, as well as those households whose income is just above the threshold. Mr Chairman, I am proud that Harlow Council will take a stand against the punitive Labour policy. The Conservative group will do everything it can to mitigate this abject failure of our MP towards the residents of Harlow. I fully support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. The monitoring officer and the chief executive in her role as RO have, returning officer, members of the public, have advised me that I need to issue a statement to all of you to please be aware that we're in a pre-election period for a by-election and to please watch your language during this debate. Councillor Ingle.
Thank you, Chair. I find it rather extraordinary to hear Councillor Garnett talking about the Labour government awarding 5.5% to teacher unions, awarding 22% to doctors over 2 years, just 11%, when he's just voted for a 150% rise for the leader, a 280% rise in the leader's special allowance. It's extraordinary, Councillor Garnett. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ingle. Any other speakers? Councillor David Carter.
Thank you, Chair. When Labour won the election, there was a theme going through that they were going to be the party of change. They also said they want to redistribute wealth. Well, they made Keir Starmer their leader, doing away with Jeremy Corbyn. At least Jeremy Corbyn paid for his clothes. Rachel Reeves claiming heating allowance for her Leeds home as an MP was disgusting. Sir Keir, as King John, taking away heating allowance from the old, and Chris Vince, as his Sheriff of Nottingham, giving his full support. Well, it's Robin Hood in reverse. What we also must remember is, on the other hand, the Conservative government backed the heating allowance and gave money to those in need via the cost of living allowance. So who is the champions of the less well-off? Certainly not the Labour Party.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Councillor Durkin.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for your advice about trying not to politicalise this situation. Can I commend Russell for his speech? I thought it was very balanced, very sensible, and it would be something that most people would be willing in principle to support. But unfortunately, the sensible person sat down and the mad got up. And actually what they have done is flipped it on its head, when actually we should be talking about a very important issue, a very sympathetic and supportive issue to the very vulnerable people in our society. But instead, what we've actually just witnessed is a deluge of absolute political tripe that has actually nothing to do with this situation. I would also say, Chair, that democracy died a little about an hour ago when we couldn't even have a debate about allowances, but somehow these people who have been in charge for 12 years feel it's okay to find the sympathy and the care that was so missing for the last 12 years. We know factually that the Labour government made a clear statement on its manifesto of what it would do. There is clear independent evidence that when they arrived in office, unfortunately, it seems like we were all misled, up and including Harlow, about the future of Princess Alexandra Hospital. So I empathise with the spirit of this motion. I think it's a duty of champions of our community to do more for the vulnerable people of our community. But to use this as an excuse for political tripe is simply stupid, it's silly, it's irrelevant, and it's not acceptable. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Durkin. Councillor Pearce.
I'm only going to say a few words, and it is going to be a few words. So I come from a family of strong Labour supporters, and if things had been very different, I could have been sitting on the opposite side of the chamber tonight. My parents were Labour to the core, and God rest their souls. If they was alive today, they would have been 2 of the 11,000 that would be affected by the removal of the Winter Fuel Allowance. They would be in their 90s and they worked hard and served for their country. This winter, they would have had to make the choice to eat or heat. All I like to say is so many of the pensioners that would... I'd like to say so many of our pensioners, they have such pride, and they their pride would actually stop them from asking for support and for help. They would suffer in silence, as my father would, as he suffered from emphysema, and that is where he worked in Harlow's industrial estate for many years, as he came to the new town to help build the future for this town. He would have had to make a life or death decision on heating or not. My parents would have voted for Labour, as they'd done for many years and for many times, and taken it back to remembering the 3-day week. As they strongly believed in Labour was for the working class. But I can honestly say that they will be turning in their graves that Labour has attacked the most vulnerable in our communities.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. If you permit me, Chair, I would just observe we've seen some particularly unbecoming scenes this evening in the way that debate has been conducted, and I'm afraid to say that when I was elected to this council, it was an immense honour, and I was elected with a firm belief in our town's motto, in common endeavour, and it's much more than just a motto, it truly is an ethos. And so I echo Councillor Durkin's sentiments that it is lamentable that we can't come together on this motion tonight because it is a thinly veiled soapbox for some, but I am nonetheless heartened that some councillors are engaging on this motion in good faith, and I just want to put out there that if any residents in Passmore's do feel particularly worried about this, they can certainly come to their councillor ward team, and we will continue to support residents, as I know every councillor in this chamber endeavours in common endeavour to support their ward residents. That's all I have to say on this motion, but it's a shame I can't support it because it's descended into, in some ways, a political lecture. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. As someone who has had the privilege to set up an adult social care charity, I feel that I must say a few words in this debate. The numbers that will be impacted, not just in this community in Harlow, but across the country, are quite stark. Those of you who follow policy, but also the challenges on the ground for people in later life, understand some of the consequences of withdrawing these types of support measures. For example, we all know that loneliness in later life is a killer. Unfortunately, charities like Age UK and others, particularly the Centre for Ageing Better, have charted some of the consequences of removing support for older people and the correlation with deaths. It's a grim topic to be debating tonight, but that is the sad reality when you do these things. We are now aware that the Treasury has conducted a full policy impact assessment. An FOI request was submitted and the Treasury has now responded to that. What I think is important to inform, not just this community but the country, is that that full impact assessment, in the interest of balance and transparency, should be published. Now, figures are being bandied around all over the place, and actually, when we're debating the numbers of people that could die as a consequence, we've got to show a bit more compassion. We've got to show a bit more compassion, because there are grandparents, there are loved ones, and this debate has been too polarised by the politics. We need to take that out, and we need to recognise the consequence of the government's action on the ground. One of the things we're now going to have to turn to as a community is to look to our charities, our business leaders, and the wider faith groups in this town to work together to address the consequences that we're now befallen. The objective must be this. Those people in our community, and we know the statistics show in this town that we, as a new town, have a significant ageing population. That is the product of a new town that spurted out in the early 50s. And we need to be responsible and support the needs of those people. That's why we've got to build a coalition. We've got to work as community leaders to tackle this issue, rather than use spurious statistics, polarised debate, when the consequences on the ground could be particularly dire for our many pensioners. I'm particularly concerned, of course, about the consequences for my own ward. Old Harlow, if you look at the data, has a specifically ageing population. And I have a responsibility, as do all councillors in this chamber, to discharge with maturity the consequences that are befallen. I'm very sad that this debate has descended into what it has. I urge colleagues to think about the facts, to think about the consequences. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Councillor Edwards.
Can I say it's a pleasure to follow Councillor Charles's contribution. Thank you for that contribution. The government's recent decision to ensure that the to means test this, it seems to me is misguided, in the sense that what they didn't do, as Councillor Charles said, and there wasn't the debate, they didn't publish the full equality impact assessment. That wasn't made available to members of Parliament at the time of the debate. And if it had been made available to members of Parliament at the time of the debate, I suspect the government wouldn't have quite got itself into the hole that it's got itself into at the moment. I mean, there is an argument, and a number of people, there is quite an argument to be saying, should this, as far as this benefit is concerned, should at some point years ago, it was introduced by Gordon Brown way back in the 1990s, it should have been incorporated into the pension. If it had been incorporated into the pension, it would have been taxed, which would have ensured that there was some degree of, for want of a better word, banding in terms of, in terms of the payments that were made, according to how wealthy people were. But at the moment, it's a non-assessed tax. Since they came up with that conclusion, there's been serious concern expressed by Age UK and other charities. Serious concern. I mean, this notion that it should only go to pensioners on pension credit. In Harlow, according to the CAB, it's estimated at the moment that approximately 2,500,000 a year in annual pension credit goes unclaimed by 991 pensioner households. If you actually look at the uptake for pensioner credit is around about 60%, rightly, across the country as a whole. So to say it should be going to that group means we're going to have to there needs to be a massive amount of work to be done to bring them up to get them involved in terms of getting the pension credit in the first place. And then the question then arises, well then what happens to those who come just above that level? My dad used to be a railway guard. When he retired on a very small pension. The very small railway pension ensured that there was a whole lot of benefits that if it was a couple of quid either way, there were a whole lot of benefits that he wasn't able to claim. And that went right the way through his his retirement. And that's what worries me about this proposal. Yes, I'm lucky. I'm retired. I've got I have a decent pension, plus the state pension. For me, it's a bit of a pain, but it's not going to make that much difference. For people just above the pension credit level, and in terms of the pension credit, you're talking, sorry, I had the figures in front of me. Pension credit tops up weekly income to £218 a week if you're single. That's what we're talking about, and then that then gives them access to other. So, but or joint weekly income of £332 a week, which is relatively speaking, a very small amount. So it seems to me that the government needs to go back and look at this again. And I'm proud to say that Harlow CLP recently passed a motion urging the government to delay means testing of the winter fuel payment until a full equality impact assessment is completed, published and scrutinised by Parliament to ensure that vulnerable pensioners, particularly those who do not claim pension credit, are protected from fuel poverty. So, from the Labour Party's point of view, local Labour Party point of view, we are going back and challenging the government. In terms of tonight, then you've laid out your resolution, but believe me, there's work going on behind, in other ways.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Are there any other speakers? In which case, Councillor Saggers, you had reserved your right to speak. Do you wish to speak at this stage? Councillor Edwards, I think you need to turn your mic on.
Yes, Chair. Chair, I thank you for letting me speak on why I seconded this motion. It's clear we must do something for the weakest in society. It's not even wrong, it's sometimes immoral to take this from those who've given their life building a great country and a great town of Harlow. And in some, they gave their ultimate price not too many years ago, even to the great Aunt Sally. To this, we've now cast them aside, leaving them to freeze or go hungry this winter. This group in our community have grown up with the ethos of non-reliance or help, but to dig in, to do their part. And then by this government, essentially, the government itself estimates there's 800 vulnerable pensioner households who are eligible for pension credit but don't claim it. Sense of pride, sense of wanting to do what's necessary. But year on year, governments, as has previously been said, even the previous Labour government, have stepped up, given the allowance to those people who need it without question, without testing them, asking them to fill in form in a few weeks before it's due to be needed. I referred to this speech that was said a few years ago. It's inhumane in this day and age for elderly people in the UK to ride buses to keep warm while the government stands by and does nothing. Who do you think said that? Our own Sir Keir Starmer. Only in May 2022. So only 2 years later, does he then cut a winter fuel allowance? Of those households, you know, it's as been previously said, if you're under 80, it's £200. If you're over 80, it's £300. It's a lot to ask people who potentially aren't technologically savvy, can't get out to the places they need to get citizens' advice, which is a great place to go to seek it, contact the local councillor to get those paperwork filled in time to receive that pension credit. I won't go through the necessaries that have been stated today, but just to total it up, it was 25 billion in budgeted terms. There's a 22 million black hole. I'll let you do the maths. There's 3 million left over. 3 billion left over, sorry. There was talk about the OBR audit that was done 10 weeks before the election. Did anybody read it? Well, I'm a geek that likes the spreadsheet. I did. There was steps set out of what was physically possible. There wasn't a 22 million black hole in that report. Put some money figures into it. The money expected to be saved by ditching the winter fuel allowance, 1.4 billion. If we got those 800,000 people onto pension credit that they are entitled to, it would cost the Treasury 2.1 billion. So there's not a win there. So why do it now? Why not wait till spring, get those people engaged, get them on the credit that they deserve, and then bring it in next year? It seems a very knee-jerk reaction to fill some other promises they've already made. Just to sum up, Chair, as has already been made, there are glowing holes in people's assessment of budgets. As we said, there's 10.8 million black hole that was bounded around not a few months ago, and now there's 22 billion black hole that's been put around in the UK finances, both of which, if you read the data, don't seem to be there. So I thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Saggers. Councillor Perrin, do you wish under 15.9 to exercise your right of reply and sum up the debate? Please do so.
Right, thank you, Chair. There's been a diverse range of opinion expressed across this chamber this evening. I'd like to draw on a few things that were said. First of all, Councillor Charles gets to the heart of it, which is, regardless of how we got here, the fact is we are here, and we need to think about the people that are going to be affected, and this chamber needs to come together to help support those people that are now affected. And so regardless of the whys and wherefores and who said what to whom and she said that and he did that, if the group opposite want to make sure that the council are doing what they can to help our residents and they want the council to get the pension credit up, they need to vote for this motion. Okay, they need to vote for this motion. Okay. Now, as Councillor Saggers has said, it doesn't stack up on an economic basis, this reason for decision, and Councillor Edwards over there made quite a fair point. It was a rushed decision. It wasn't gone through the right processes. But the thing is, there are people now that are having to suffer the effects of that. And so there may be some people that are slightly emotive when they speak on this subject and angry, and they will say things that may be hurtful to hear. But the reason they're hurtful to hear is because they are hurting people that we know. And regardless of the ill thought out process, The fact of the matter is it has been an ill thought out process, and those that govern are there to make sure that they look after all of us, and they need to do the right things. And so it gets people really wound up, really riled up, when you see the Chancellor and the Deputy Prime Minister arguing over who's going to live in Dorney Wood. It's like Napoleon Pig and Squeaker fighting over it. It's ridiculous. And it's about the tone they set. It's about the tone they set. We wouldn't expect anybody in here to act like that, but yet they at the top of government are acting like that. A pensioner gets £10,500 a year. The Chancellor's combined income, her household income, I hear is 300,000. And yet she is claiming for a second home to be heated to the tune of 3,900 a year. So it's about the optics, and that's why people say things that are so emotive, because it's the people that are making these decisions, it really gets people riled. But as Councillor Charles says, we do need to get away from that, and we need to go back to what can we do? What can we do to help and support those people? And it sets out in this motion very clearly what this council can do to help support people on the ground. There may be moves afoot behind the scenes to do more, but let's do this as well. This isn't going to undermine that effort. It would have been nice to see the MP vote against it in Parliament. That would have been a step. That would have been a step forward. It's a matter of fact. It's not a campaign. It's a matter of fact. That's what he's done. So, I seriously ask people to consider supporting this issue. The facts have been laid out for the Chancellor and all to see, as Councillor Saggers has rightly said again. The constitutional privilege that the Chancellor had when she was in opposition was to have access to the permanent Treasury Secretary, and all of these were made available, these figures were made available long in advance. So the decision has been ill thought out, and we need to act now to help people on. Through you, Chair, if I may, break with convention and just ask, as Councillor Purser said, there are people in our community who are too proud to claim what is theirs. And through you, Chair, if anybody is watching through this new webcast system, if anybody out there is listening on behalf of an elderly resident, you are entitled to that pension credit. Claim it. There is no dignity in sitting there cold this winter. No one will think any less of you. No one will think anything more of you. You have earned it. You claim it. You keep warm. And I know everybody in this room would agree with that sentiment. And for that reason and that reason alone, I urge people to put aside the wrongdoings of parties. And trust me, no party has the preserve of getting things wrong. They all do it. And I ask us today to come together and to vote this motion through in the interest, the better interest of all of those people. And we are bound to know loads of people, friends, family, neighbours, that will suffer as a result of this ill thought out decision, which I'm sure if the Chancellor had her time again, would actually not have done. I'm certain of that. But she has made that, and we need to now challenge that, and we need to write to them and make sure that the pressure is on to make sure that pensioners are looked after. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Perrin. That being the summing up, I'll move to the vote. And you have the relevant number of councillors standing.
Thank you, Chair. Members, I'll invite you one by one to clearly indicate whether you're for, against or abstaining. Councillor Daniel Brown. Thank you. Councillor David Carter.
For.
Councillor Joel Charles.
For.
Councillor Jodie Dunn.
Abstain.
Councillor Tony Durkin.
Against.
Councillor Tony Edwards.
Abstain.
Councillor Mike Garnett.
For.
Councillor Emma Ghaffari.
For.
Councillor James Greggs.
Abstain.
Councillor Alistair Gunn.
For.
Councillor Michael Hardware.
For.
Councillor Michael Houlihan. Councillor Maggie Holcobe. Councillor Mark Ingle.
Against.
Councillor Andrew Johnson.
Abstain.
Councillor James Leppard.
For.
Councillor Sue Livings.
For.
Councillor Kay Morrison.
Abstain.
Councillor Stefan Muller-Toll. Councillor Aidan O'Dell.
Abstain.
Councillor Russell Perrin.
For.
Councillor Nicky Purse.
For.
Councillor Matthew Saggers.
For.
Councillor Stacey Seals. Councillor Lenny Shears. Councillor Jake Shepherd.
I'd hope to abstain, but after the comment, I'm voting against.
Councillor Dan Swords.
For.
Thank you, councillors.
Thank you very much, councillors. The vote is 14 for, 4 against, with 9 abstentions, which means the motion is carried. Item 11.